like you really need to get clear on what you want because it's really the Wild West out there.
Hello, and welcome aboard another episode of the Captain's Lifestyle Podcast. This is your captain speaking, Taylor Morgan. On today's episode, we have another special guest. His name is Warren. Not Warren Buffett, although he's better than Warren Buffett because, well, listen to the bio. As the co-founder of the Community Leaders Association, Warren Carlyle is a community building strategist who works with purpose-driven brands and influencers to build highly engaged online communities. He is also the founder and CEO of OctoNation, the largest octopus fan club, a nonprofit organization that inspires conservation of the ocean by teaching the world about octopuses. Octopuses. He and his communities have been featured and gotten the attention of celebrities and global organizations such as Michael B. Jordan, Ellen DeGeneres, Joe Rogan, Facebook headquarters, and more. Warren believes online communities are the lifeblood of a brand's relevancy in today's crowded digital marketplace. Warren, welcome to the show, man.
What's going on?
Happy to have you on. So I found you through somebody I follow reposted something about OctoNation, and I was like, wow, that is amazing. Because after seeing, well, I've always found octopuses fascinating, but especially after seeing, what's that documentary?
My Octopus Teacher.
Yes, that was amazing. You've seen that, obviously.
Of course, yeah. It's doing really good for us.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, and I didn't know about the other agency you have. So let's first touch on OctoNation. What got you started into that? Like how did that come about?
So I guess my first experience, as a kid, I was obsessed with aliens, just the idea of there being extraterrestrial life. I remember if you wanted to get me to do anything as a kid, all you had to do was tell me, hey, I'll buy you alien stickers or a bedspread or, just bring me anything alien. It wasn't until I was 7 and we went on a field trip to the aquarium and we were supposed to walk single file line. And I kind of dipped to the back of the line and waited till no one was looking and then fell off the back and kind of explored, had my own little aquarium, visit by myself and found myself in front of the octopus exhibit. And I just remember looking up and being like, this thing is alien. There's no way this thing is from this planet. And I didn't quite know what to do with my fascination for octopus back then. I went to the library. There were surprisingly no books. I was really surprised. I was like, why is there books about all these other animals and not the octopus? And it wasn't until later on when, fast forward to 2015, when I read the book, The Soul of an Octopus, that in the first couple of pages, Cy Montgomery outlines that they were continuously demonized through Western culture for the past 100 years, misrepresented, mischaracterized, shown in Hollywood films as like these malicious animals. And I was like, oh, I get it. I was like, they just have a really bad like PR agent. And so I thought if Mickey Mouse, if Walt Disney can, create PR around a mouse, I can do it with the octopus. And so I created the Instagram account and then started reintroducing the octopus as the superhero of the sea, that there were 300 different types and they, depending on where they lived in the ocean, they had a unique superpower that allowed them to thrive in their given environment, and just started detailing stories about these species. And the writing took off, it blew up, and I started getting shared, featured. It also helps that I have a really good background in marketing, so we can talk about that a little bit later. But that's kind of like the evolution of OctoNation. And in 2018, after people kept asking me, hey, where can I donate? I was just like, we're just a page where like, there's nothing you can donate to. It was just something that I did in my free time. And then after I started getting asked, how can I give you money every single day? I was like, okay, like I have to make this into something.
Yeah.
So I founded it as a nonprofit in 2018, and now we have over 600,000 members, and we've done a lot of really cool stuff.
Isn't that amazing how when you follow your passion, that leads to monetization? And not that you're doing it for money, but I think I've said this on almost every podcast. People have it backwards. Like they work for money, expecting the money to bring them fulfillment. But if you just follow what fulfills you in the first place, that's what brings you happiness. And then the monetization can follow that. So that's amazing that you're able to build that. Quiz. How many hearts does an octopus have?
3.
Okay, just testing you, just making sure. That's one of the only octopus facts that I know.
I know a whole lot more.
I can imagine. What's one of the most interesting facts about? Well, I guess there's so many different types, but
yeah, for me, I'm always fascinated by octopus eyes, only because, well, there's a lot of reasons, but I always tell people, imagine having 2 panoramic cameras attached to the sides of your head. You can essentially see 360 degrees around you because octopuses are just highly preyed upon. They're a floating protein bar for a lot of ocean animals. They're really important in the ecosystem. That they just evolved to not have a blind spot. And so there's like literally 0 way to sneak up on an octopus. So just the fact that those horizontal bars in their eyes, can see 360 degrees around them is just, to me, one of the coolest things.
I was wondering why their pupils were like that, but that makes
it's
sense.
Similar to if you've ever seen a goat. Like goats have those pupils too. Again, it's for the same reasons. They need to be able to see behind themselves because they're a tasty little snack for a lot of animals in the forest. So yeah, they evolved to have those eyes.
Yeah, you mentioned that octopuses are an important species, which I believe every single species is important, but why are octopuses specifically so critical to the ocean environment?
So I remember when I first created OctoNation, and my brother actually told me that I was probably going to be the only person in the fan club, which was really funny. And then he told me, he was like, are octopuses going extinct? And I said, no. And it's just funny the way people think about conservation efforts and things like that. Because he wasn't the only one who told me this. He said, well, then why don't you choose an animal that's going extinct to, create something around, like the octopus, if it's not going extinct. And I was like, you don't have to wait till an animal is on the brink of extinction to care or learn about it, which was really important in the beginning because I thought, okay, how do I bring the octopus into the marketplace, or bring to octopus into people's, lives in a way that they care about them before they, there's no way they're going to go extinct. They're actually thriving in the ocean right now, but they're such an important staple for a lot of ocean animals' diets. And so they're just really important in that way. They kind of, I don't know, they're just in all of their ecosystems, they're really important.
So what is OctoNation? So the Instagram page is obviously very popular. There's a lot of knowledge and just really cool posts on there. What else is it? You've created a community around it, correct?
Yeah. So OctoNation, like I said, in 2018, we founded a nonprofit, and my whole kind of reasoning behind it was I wanted to, because I don't have a background in marine biology. There's no science in my background whatsoever, but I do have a really good knack for explaining things in a way that make people go, oh, I finally get it. Instead of talking about like the mechanics behind an octopus's radula, I'm just like, so an octopus has a tongue like a cat, and they're like, well, yeah, and they try to overcomplicate it. I'm like, no, it's like a cat tongue, and so when I bring that kind of information, people are able to tell their friends, hey, you know what I learned today? And so I wanted to add some legitimacy behind OctoNation. So when I first started, I started partnering with octopus researchers. And one of our lead scientists is Chelsea Bennis, Dr. Chelsea Bennis, and she's out of Florida. And so she helped me create Octopedia, which is a comprehensive field guide of octopus species written in a way that people can understand. So in a lot of ways, I started creating resources for the things that I wish that I had as a kid in that library. When I went to go, research the octopus, I was like, there's no, book that was written for, either a kid, or there's no book that was written for someone like you and me that just wants to learn cool stuff about the octopus. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to start creating those resources. So we started creating coloring books. We started creating curriculum that we piloted at schools. We started creating campaigns like virtual octopus encounters. So we have a campaign called Interview with an Octopus, where I take people, around the world to different aquariums, and I play with an octopus, and I ask the Aquarius questions, and I allow the audience to ask questions, and they ask questions like, are they slippery, or what do they feel like? Or is it true that they'll hurt you? All of their like preconceived notions, we can just get it all out of the way, and we can like start answering their questions. And I think that through that, I've kind of changed the way that people view the octopus. And like, I guess all their preconceived notions of it, like, them attacking ships or them wanting to attack a human while they're in the ocean or something like that. None of that stuff is true. And so I just created content around just kind of dispelling all those myths. So we create, education. We create curriculum for kids. And really right now, my most important thing is just creating like the online resource, the one-stop shop, the gold standard for all things octopus related, written in a way that people understand, and also co-written by marine biologists. So it's just one big massive resource right now.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
why do you think it's important to bring awareness to octopuses, and not just octopuses in general, but I guess all of marine life? Like, why is that something so important?
To me, well, octopus is just my passion. So you could ask the same thing to somebody who's championing turtles or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I just feel like the octopus is such a under-researched animal, and the fact that people aren't aware that there's over 300 species. Like, most people aren't aware that there's something called a sand octopus, right? And because of its environment, it lives around all this sand, so it evolved without the ability to change colors, because of its sandy environment. So over millions of years, it died off and came back and whatever, and finally evolved to be like, wait a minute, if I blast underground, and then somehow secrete a mucus to reinforce the walls around it so that I could create this predator-proof bunker, and then create a ventilation shaft with one of my arms, I can escape predators, live underground, and survive. And so over this time, it's evolved to be masters of its environment, right? And that's the story of every single octopus in whatever environment it's in. If it's in an Antarctic location, it's evolved with some special compound in its blood that allows it to thrive in Arctic conditions, right? If it's a sand octopus, it learned how to evolve. So they all have these really unique superpowers, and I just think they're understudied. And there's a lot of stuff that we can learn from like an adaptation standpoint, from there's just so much there. And I just wanted to create the platform to fund in the future. Kind of what I see OctoNation doing is having the ability to fund like taxonomists to research more about the octopus, to fund research expeditions, to fund more underwater photography that captures things. So I just saw, the octopus, and I just thought there's so much here, and there's so many stories to be told. And I feel like the octopus is a good lens. Like if you wanted to get inspired and be less apathetic about the ocean because it's so big and you don't really know where you fit in. Mm-hmm. I think looking at the octopus and starting to go down that rabbit hole of just like, wow, I had no idea, will make you just drawn to the ocean, and start being, what we found in OctoNation is that people that start following it, they start doing things that are like, they start living a little bit more consciously. They're like, hey, wait a minute, if I love this animal and I'm starting to love the ocean, what steps can I take in my life to live a more sustainable lifestyle? And so that wasn't our aim when we first started. We don't talk about living sustainably. We don't show ocean pollution. We don't show the mistreatment of animals. But just through their natural love and affinity of the ocean, they're consciously making decisions, which I feel like is a more sustainable relationship with the ocean than showing them octopus with their arms getting chopped off or these islands of pollution. I feel like showing that imagery just shuts a lot of people down, and they start feeling nihilistic. Like, well, if we've already screwed over the ocean, then screw it. Like, I'm just going to live how I live and whatever. But if they're inspired first and they have this deep found love and appreciation, and they're anchored to their love for the ocean, they start making conscious decisions. And so that's why I feel like OctoNation works, is because that's our angle here. We want to deeply anchor you to the love of the ocean first. You can learn about there's plenty of organizations that will tell you the horrors of the ocean. OctoNation, our job here is to get you to actually care through wonder, through inspiration, through education. That's our mission. So
yeah, that's awesome. And I think both sides are important. I think people need to see both sides, but you're absolutely right. Like you have to care first, and that happens by, creating a connection. And that's, you mentioned that my octopus teacher is helping you guys out. Is that movie helps you connect with the octopus. Like you can see a little bit of yourself in the octopus. And I've always loved the ocean, but after seeing that, like I was just like, wow, like
And
ocean.
octopuses, in the wild, octopuses are, like I said, highly preyed upon. They're not the most playful creatures, because think about you being a floating protein bar in the ocean without a shell. You go out and you hunt, so you're an efficient hunter, and then you go back and you den. That's your life if you're an octopus. There's no just gallivanting out and exposing your body to all the predators. And so they're not really that much of a social creature. But what we found with like captive octopuses, like the giant Pacific octopus at an aquarium, is that if they develop trust, and they can learn through observation, and they can actually recognize individual human faces, that they start demonstrating what you could see as almost like not a friendship, but hey, I know you, like you're not going to harm me, I trust you. And so I always say, like, the giant Pacific octopuses at aquarium are literally like squishy puppies. Like they come up, like if they see their keeper or their Aquarius, they come up, they start changing colors, they throw their arms over the edge of the exhibit, and they're just like, pet me, essentially. Wow. You can pet it and it'll stay up. I was just at Aquarium of the Pacific playing with Brute, which is their giant Pacific octopus there. And like literally like a squishy puppy dog, he's just there, and he's just like, hey, like, what's going on?
Wow.
So they're a whole lot of fun, and you'd be surprised at how they can actually form relationships. They're very short-lived, so giant Pacific octopuses really only live for 2 to 3 years, but yeah, they're a relationship nonetheless.
Yeah. Have you thought about how you could use learning about octopuses as a way to cultivate creativity? Because octopuses are so creative. You mentioned that, the sand octopus, for example, like that's fascinating that they evolved to learn how to do that, and the mimic octopus and all that stuff. So have you played around with, you mentioned like you were creating children's stuff. Have you thought about how you could tie that in?
For sure. Yeah. So we have curriculum, like create your own octopus. So after you learn about all of the defense and adaptations of various species, you can get creative and say, okay, like what would your superpower be if you were an octopus, And so we have a lot of we have this Octomania. So if you go to OctoNation.com and you click the kids tab, there's this free downloadable, it's a octopus activity book. And so in there, it teaches you about different types of octopuses. There's create your own octopus, there's word searches, there's like a bunch of stuff. But yeah, it's just, I think when you're inspired by the octopus, you start coming up with really fun things. Like the coconut octopus is a really interesting species too, because it does something called stilt walking, where it's figured out how to get shells, like these bivalve shells or coconut halves, and it raises up its arms and it starts walking, carrying these different objects, so that if a predator comes, it'll just close up and protect its like squishy, vulnerable parts. And so what I thought, I was like, what'd be really fun is creating this coconut octopus relay, where kids have to put a pillow like in between their like kneecaps, and they have to like run and do a relay, and they could pretend like they're a coconut octopus. They could learn about it and just demonstrate, like, isn't that hard? Where a coconut octopus, imagine not having any bones and doing that, And so it's just, there's a lot of fun things to do and get kids really inspired. In the future, like I would want a kid to like identify with a certain octopus, being like, oh, well, if I was an octopus, I'd be a blanket octopus, or if I was an octopus, I would be. So that's how I'll know when I'm kind of like my measure of success, when kids are aware of the biodiversity within the octopus species. And we're doing that in a lot of ways by creating collectibles. I think you've seen the people can't see it here, but like the illustrations that we're doing. So we have an Octo Barista collection, and it's species specific octopuses, and they're drinking, coffee, but they're species specific. So it gives us an opportunity to be fun, but also to teach people about the biodiversity within the octopus species. So again, it's just trying to think of fun ways to teach and to get people into our world, and to inspire them to care more about the ocean.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up about how you have like an ultimate vision in mind about how if a kid can identify with a certain octopus, then that's kind of, how you know that you've accomplished what you set out to accomplish. How important do you think it is as a business or as an entrepreneur, a founder of a company, to begin with the end in mind? Because that's something that I teach my clients. Like, you have to know what it is that you want to accomplish before you set out to do anything. So when you created OctoNation, I know it didn't start off as like this big nonprofit. When did you come up with those kind of objectives for OctoNation?
I would say that I came up with them at the very beginning. I've always been really big on, and this is kind of goes into the second thing that I do, building communities online. And one of my exercises that I give people who I'm working with is, what do you write your testimonials? What do you want people to say about the transformation that they get as a result of working with you? Like, what do you want them to feel? Like, what are those feelings? And then once you know what those testimonials are, then you can reverse engineer that through content strategy. So, what would it take for someone to actually say these words out in the wild to their friend? Like if it's like, say it's a personal, if it's a personal fitness coach, it'll be like, he just really explains things in a way that I understand. And, I really like working with him because he doesn't rush me. And I really like that he takes the time. Like, so if you're like identifying these words, then you have to build that into, okay, how would you actually how could you manufacture those words out of somebody's mouth? You'd have to create a content strategy that points to these very real statements. And so I always think it's really important that you begin with the end in mind and start even thinking about how you want people to feel in your presence. How do you want your organization to, or your business, what are people saying about your business? And then you can reverse engineer that. Yeah.
Well, I'm super excited to now get into the community building aspect of what you do. But first, I have a few more questions regarding OctoNation. First, where does the money go when you donate to research, to help funding the projects you're working on?
So it goes to the various campaigns that we have. So our programming as of right now is really heavily based in kids, like OctoNation kids. And so we work with curriculum writers and developers. So I work with this woman named Judy York. She is at Baylor University, and she gives stipends to teachers that are creating lesson plans that are within the, right now they're the Texas kind of like base curriculum. So they fit within, because it was really important for me, if teachers were going to use this, that it fit within their existing curriculum so they would be more likely to use it. Yeah. Right. And so I kind of thought that out. And so instead of me writing it or having our science writers write it, I thought I want to work with, I want to consult with somebody who can get me into classrooms. And so a lot of it goes towards hiring consultants like Judy to give stipends to these teachers, which was great because during the pandemic, a lot of them were looking for extra money. And so we were happy to work with teachers to do that. And then a lot of it is not that many people are aware of like licensing and photos. Yeah. And our science writers like Chelsea and Corinne, and I have a blog manager, I have a creative director. As of right now, all the funding goes to making all that stuff happen. So like illustrations, and we have it pretty much outlined on our website. If you go there, if you look at Octopedia, so, getting all that information, having somebody synthesize it, write it, licensing photos. So a lot of money goes into that. So yeah, so a lot of it can be found if you just go to octonation.com and you look around, you're like, wow. So yeah.
And now how can we donate? Through the website, yeah. I'm imagining.
Yeah, you can go to the website. We also have a shop too. A lot of people love donating and through our merch. Mm-hmm. And so we have a lot of merch that you can buy. We do campaigns every now and then, like for October, it's Octopus month for us. And so we do a lot of really fun things. And we also have a lot of opportunities to donate in a lot of ways that are not just you giving money, but you receiving something in like we work with a Disney animator named Brian Kessinger, who has worked with us for World Octopus Day. And so typically he'll like on that day, he'll teach people how to draw an octopus, which is fun to like learn how to draw an octopus with a Disney animator. So we're just create a lot of fun stuff, a lot of opportunities for people to show up to events that sometimes are paid events, sometimes are free events. And so like look out for those. If you sign up for our newsletter, you can be plugged into everything that's going on.
And then also the Instagram lives, because I joined one of your, I think you mentioned it was your first Instagram live, and I donated a little bit on there.
Yeah, it was our first Instagram live with badges. Because I was just kind of testing it out to kind of see how this was going to work. I don't, as much as I like, I'm the founder, the CEO. I would much rather hand it off to somebody who really enjoys being charismatic. I wouldn't say that like I'm the one who's like really gung ho to like get on an Instagram live and just chat like crazy. I'd rather pass the mic to somebody who is just like that would love to do that. And so I was just kind of testing it out and then playing with it to see, okay, what campaigns can I create for maybe our science writers or our partners like Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute? Could we do like a deep sea collaboration? So there's a lot of things that I have in the works.
Well, you better speed that up because I like to go live on Instagram with my podcast guests once the episode is released. So
okay, we can do that. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd love to do that. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we can get that started, and I can link it to. You're a 501c3, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, then I should be able to link it directly through Instagram to be able to donate.
Awesome.
So yes, stay tuned for that, guys, and go ahead, shout out the OctoNation Instagram.
Yeah, it's just if you just go to @OctoNation, OCTO Nation, you'll be able to find us there.
Perfect. And then I would recommend turning on the notifications for the live so you get notified when we do go live and talk about it. Yo, Taylor here. So I'm sure you've heard me harp on sleep and basically every single podcast and video that I put out because it truly is that important. And I'm excited to announce that I've created something very simple and very tactical that you guys can use to start improving your sleep immediately. In fact, it is the fastest way to improve the quality of your sleep and therefore the quality of your life with amazing results after just one single night of implementation. Seriously. This is the same nightly ritual that I personally use, and it's the same strategy that I teach all of my high-performing clients in the Captain's Lifestyle program. It's the 4-3-2-1-30 method, and I'm giving it away to you guys for free. All you have to do is follow the link in my Instagram bio or in the show notes of this podcast, and I'll send it over so you can start sleeping better tonight. But please do not sleep on this offer. It's literally free, so no excuses. Go do it. And sweet dreams. So now let's get into a little bonus topic because I was not even aware that this was part of what you do, but the Community Leaders Association. Talk to us about that.
So kind of give you a background of how I got into marketing at all. It started with back in 2011, my mom actually passed away of breast cancer. And so I wasn't really sure. I was like 22 at the time. And so it kind of blindsided me. And so I found myself at like a Barnes and Noble one day, like walking and looking at all the books and the magazines being like, what do I want to do for my life now? Because it was just such like this cataclysmic event in my head, like losing someone so close to me. And so I remember I was walking and I was like, I just want to get out of here. Like I want to move. I don't know what I want to do. I was kind of having like a crisis in Barnes and Noble. And I was walking down the magazine section and I saw all these fashion magazines and I was like, I want to move to New York. And it was just like came out of the blue. And I was like, and it was like, I was thinking because my brain, I'm highly strategic with when I say I want to do something, I create a strategy in order to get there. And it's a very practical, logical strategy. So I was like, okay, how could I be there? And I was like, okay, I could be an intern for something. And I was like, what do I want to be an intern for? And I was like, I'll be an intern for a celebrity fashion photographer. I've always been interested in, the modeling industry, kind of like seeing behind the scenes, how that works. And I was like, that's what I'll do. So I went out and I laid out all these fashion magazines and I started looking for fashion photographers in New York. I used Instagram and I started direct messaging them and telling them, hey, are you looking for an intern? Here are all the things that I could potentially do for you behind the scenes. I could make sure that you're building your brand alongside of the talent that you're photographing. I could make sure, and I did this long list. And I was surprised that a lot of them said yes, like they were interested in working with me. But who I actually chose to work with was a guy by the name of Chung Kai Shi. who was a celebrity fashion photographer that worked with tons of models and shot on behalf of different brands like J. Crew, Todd Snyder, Uniqlo, Mont Blanc. And so I worked with him, and after about 4 or 5 months of moving to New York and working with him, I became a studio manager, and all of a sudden had a direct in to a lot of these different major brands. And so I started attending these marketing events, and I started listening to how these brands were looking at influencers and how they were doing campaigns with influencers and how like the inner workings of their marketing. And I remember thinking, if they're just manufacturing relevancy with cloth, then why can't I do that with something that I love? Enter OctoNation, right? So I used all of what I learned in that environment with them, just like making this, like this is Uniqlo, right? And it's just like, how did Uniqlo create their brand? All they did was associate their brand with certain individuals, a certain lifestyle, and then they plugged in, all of these different components to it, made an aesthetic. And so I was like, why can't I do that with something I love? So I was just like, I'm going to create relevancy with the Octopus into the market. I'm going to test this out. And so it was kind of like taking the thing that I was obsessed about all my life and being like, okay, let's see if I'm great at this. Let's see if I understand what I'm doing. And come to find out I did. So I then I was like, well, maybe it's just, because the octopus is a really cool thing. Let me take something else. Like I'll take one of my friends who's like an artist, or so I started working closely with my friends for free, and I started blowing up like their Instagram accounts. And this is really platform agnostic. So it could be YouTube, it could be Twitter. I found that it works on any platform. So I started developing a methodology called like the 7 C's of building a fanatical community, obviously a play off of seas and the 7 oceans, or the 7 C's of the world. And I developed out this thing where if I am trying to build a community for a community leader, like say, this woman who I worked with, who created the largest community for women who suffer chronic migraine. So then you kind of go to, the first C, which is clarity, who and the what of the community. And the more vague those two things are, the more you have the potential to alienate your community, and the more it'll fall apart. So you want to get very clear on that clarity part. And then you go into core values. And I mean, I could talk for 45 minutes about the 7 C's, but I won't. But I found that throughout the years of me doing that and working with not just OctoNation, but I've worked with thousands of community leaders now, and then got hired by Facebook to teach community leaders and page admins how to build fanatical online communities, that I was like, you know what, I want to create something for myself. So I created the Community Leaders Association with my partner, and he talks a lot about the monetization side about it. And I talk a lot about the strategic campaign building and collaboration. And he very much, because his background is in corporate sponsorship, partnership, monetization, JV affiliates. And I'm all about, okay, how do you keep people's attention on a daily basis through strategic campaigns, collaborations, content, that we just decided to kind of join forces and create this association for people who are looking to ethically are looking to build communities online that make a difference. So we're really excited. Like I said, we launched it not too long ago. I think it was like 4 months ago. We're still kind of in beta with it. We have about 40 people in it right now, but we haven't really launched it to the public. But you can look at it at communityleadersassociation.com.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Lot to unpack here.
Yeah.
First off, I want to highlight what you did in the Barnes and Noble.
Yeah.
You had this thing come to you, and I love that attitude, that mindset that you have. Just, okay, this is what I want. Now, how can I make that happen?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have kind of an idea in their head of what they would want, and then they just kind of like, that's it. Like they just have an idea and they think that maybe one day it'll just appear. But
I think when you said they think it'll appear, I think it's more psychological. I think lots of people, depending on their work ethic, they genuinely feel like they deserve it before they've earned it. Like there's this really strong sense of entitlement from a lot of people that I've talked to, that they're just like, well, I want it so that I should have it. And that's not how the world works. It might work for, like, depending on how privileged you are. If like, you're independently wealthy or you come from a really rich background, it might work for you, but it's not working for you in the way that you think it's working for you.
Right.
You're in a leverage situation. And so, I advise, my clients that come to me and who are independently wealthy, the first thing that I tell them to do is get a good therapist so they can plant their feet firmly on the ground and start realizing kind of like how the world works. But yeah, I'm a huge advocate of like mental health, and you don't need a therapist just because like you're broken or you're having a hard time thinking through something. You need a therapist for high performance. I have an executive leadership coach. I'm a huge advocate of business coaching. So most people think they need to get to a certain point before they start implementing these things, and they needed it yesterday.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's what I'm trying to work with people on. I'm like, you don't have to burn out before you hire a coach to help you in business and health, happiness, all that stuff. Like, there's no better time to start working on yourself than right now.
Yeah.
So I love that you brought that up.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it all comes down to work. Like, you had that goal in mind, and immediately you're like, okay, what can I do? You got creative with it. You looked in the magazines, you found their names, you hit them up on Instagram, and you sent them a DM of how you can help them.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you reach out to somebody on Instagram, nobody's gonna answer a DM saying, like, if you're asking them for something. Like, it's always phrase it in how you can bring them value. And I think that's fascinating that more people than you were even expecting said yes, probably because of how you phrase the messaging.
Yeah, it's really, I'm really good at understanding what would, I don't know where that came from. I understood social media and this idea of like the decentralization of the media, meaning like, we did have the TV and everybody was just, their attention was on the TV because that's the only place that, as far as newspapers, but you could only get your information from so many different sources. And I remember when I was younger, and even when MySpace came out, I was like, this is a really interesting idea from the standpoint of pretty soon, people are not going to watch the TV. They're going to watch their favorite person, and so I think I understood this idea of community back then, from a standpoint of what happens when all that stuff is decentralized. And we're living in a really interesting time right now where there is so much decentralization of everything. Like, and every industry is being disrupted by decentralization. And I talk about this all the time with my friends. I mean, you can look at it anywhere. You can look at the decentralization of mainstream media. You can look at the decentralization of the porn industry with OnlyFans. You can look at the decentralization of sports with, now college students can go off and create their own brands. That money is being siphoned. And so, what are you going to do from an attention standpoint? It's like, you really need to get clear on what you want, because it's really the Wild West out there, for people who are highly strategic and creative. Like, you can create a brand overnight. And I've done that with many, many people. And it's just, it works I wouldn't say it works every time, because I'm very selective with who I decide to work with. And they have to be like a purpose-driven leader or entrepreneur. I'm not looking to work with someone who just wants to make a brand a whole lot of money. But we're really living in an interesting time, and I'm like super excited about, passing the mic to people who deserve a platform, and taking the mic away from people who are just in a position they're in because of politics.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting.
We are exactly aligned. I mean, that's exactly why I created the Captain's Lifestyle. I originally started working with just any entrepreneur, but I very quickly found out that I didn't want to work with anybody who did not have some sort of, bigger impact or purpose behind what they were doing. Mm-hmm. And I would, even from the start, I would turn down clients who just, like, we would get on a call and they'd say, I'd ask them, I was like, okay, well, why do you want to achieve that goal? And they're like, oh, well, I just want more money so I can be happier. I was like, okay, well, what are you going to do with that money? And it was just all selfish things. And I, of course, turned them down. And it's just doing what I do now, like helping social entrepreneurs just like you. It's so fulfilling. Yeah. Because the more, like you said, the more that we can pass the mic, literally, like right now on this podcast, while I'm interviewing you, this is why I interview social and impact-driven entrepreneurs, so that we can get their message out to more people and help make the world a better place. And we do that, as you know very well, by building community. So now let's get into those 7 C's of building a fanatical community.
Yeah. So the first C is clarity. And so, like I said, who and what is the community for? So, if you want to help, so I'll give you an example with one of my previous clients, Dr. Lindsay Weitzel. When she first came to me, she said that she wanted to help people mitigate their pain. And I said, okay, cool. So who and what? So who is the people and the what is pain? Unfortunately, pain is very vague.
Yeah.
And I was like, you're going to alienate a lot of people, because what's going to happen is you're going to create this community and people are going to say, well, I have lupus. Okay, well, I have migraine. Okay. And then they're going to start saying, well, my pain is worse than your pain. You don't understand, right? And so I said, tell me about your background. Tell me, give me a story about why you want to do what you want to do. Come to find out, she'd suffered chronic debilitating migraine ever since she was 2 years old. Had a bad experience with a doctor that basically said, it's all in your head. You just want attention as a little girl, and you don't even know what you're talking about. So with that bad interaction, she kind of repressed, okay, maybe it's all in my head, but she had chronic debilitating migraine. Yeah. And it was only until later, when she was diagnosed with it, that she was just like, I don't want anybody to be in this position. I don't want anybody to have to mitigate their pain the way that I did, because I was afraid of speaking out. And so I said, that's it. I was like, that's your story. You want to help women who suffer chronic debilitating migraine. And I was like, every single time you go to post, you will apply what you know to 100% of your community. And I was just like, and they will get it, right? Whereas there are people that create communities that are too broad. And if they post something, it might apply to 30% of their community over here. Well, guess what the algorithm is going to do if you're only applying to 30% of your audience? It's going to say, I'm sorry, but you don't have a deep enough affinity with your community for us to really make sense of you in the algorithm. So we're just going to lower the reach of your whole entire account. So that's how really the algorithm works. They're looking for communities and accounts that have high community affinity, that have high relevancy every single time they post, that it applies to 100% of the community. And so you have to get really clear with that clarity aspect of it.
Yeah, you just gave me a breakthrough, because I think that's exactly what happened to my community, my Instagram account. Because I used to get, multiple hundreds of like story views and like up to thousands of likes on my Instagram posts. But that was when I was posting mainly fitness related stuff. And since then, I have realized that fitness is really not all that important. It is, but sleep is much more important, and nutrition and community and relationships are all more important. And then fitness is, something else. And so I started posting more holistic style content, and my likes just started dropping. And I was like, well, why is this happening?
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like this is a whole other podcast, because I can tell, like, it's different when you are a fitness person and when you're attractive. I've worked with tons of fitness professionals. When I worked in New York, I worked with a lot of influencers, and you have to combat this pretty privilege that you have to understand that a lot of people, a lot of reason why people might follow you is because, I basically tell my pretty people is that every single day you need to work to take a chip on the pedestal that people put you on. And so if that means opening up about things that you wouldn't normally open about, if that means like actually sharing your values and long form content, like you really need to do away with the whole mysterious vibe that you have, and really start tapping into really who you are as an individual. And I was like, and it's going to be a completely different brand shift, but you'll have, like, when you actually go to promote something or do something, you'll have more people show up versus them following you for all the wrong reasons. Mm-hmm. And so I've had to completely 180 change fitness professionals' brands. Like, there's this one guy who worked with me, and he wanted to launch an ebook just to make money. And it was a fitness ebook, and it was only like $7. And I said, where in your post have you ever taught people to actually do anything like an ab routine? And he's like, well, I haven't. And I said, people don't follow you to learn from you. And he was just like, well, if I launch this would be a good way for them to learn from me. And I was like, you need to create a launch. Like, we need to do a 3 to 9 month launch on you actually educating people, and then launch it into a product. And he was like, no, he's like, I don't want to hear that. And so he went to go launch his book, and come to find out, I think he sold like 10 or 12 copies. This is somebody that had like 3.6 million people that was following.
Wow.
And it just goes to show, like, if you're not doing the thing that you're trying to get, money for, unless it's the thing that he could have really gotten money for, which was OnlyFans, if he went down that route, because that was the reason that people were following. It was a purely it was a purely surface level type of following, which is fine if that's the market, if we're like clear in our heads that that's the market. But if you're not aware and you're being naive and you think it's this other thing, then that's delusion. You know what I mean? And I have to okay, let's firmly put your feet on the ground and let's really discuss why people are following you. It's not for all the reasons you think sometimes. And so it's like getting very clear with the psychology behind the people who follow you. And then getting to a point where, okay, we need to create a separate attention graph, because I want to be sure that when I go to post, 100% of my audience actually cares about this content versus say 70% who actually just want to see me with my shirt off. Like that's the content for them. It's not because they want to learn or anything. So it's like really really redoing the strategy in that point. But all that to say, that's kind of like the clarity phase and getting really clear.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, you're talking literally directly at me. That's me. So selfish question, and I've made posts like this before, like, please unfollow me if you do not resonate with this. And like, I share my story, I share my values, I share what I'm all about. Do you think that I should go in and like, I don't know what the phrase is, like not unfollow, but delete the followers who don't care about my content?
No. So I might, this is getting into a little bit of consulting, but I would for you, because of the conversations, like you're looking to have nuanced, you're ready to have these nuanced conversations. And if your Instagram doesn't have the capacity to facilitate those nuanced conversations as evidenced by your analytics, I would create a separate, maybe attention graph in a Facebook group. And I'd bring the people who want to have these nuanced conversations in there to kind of deepen your relationship with them, and just kind of separate it initially and then play with that for a little while. I would start owning their first. So I'm really big as a community, like the Community Leaders Association is going to be really big on collecting the first party data of your clients. I always tell people Instagram, Facebook, YouTube is borrowed attention. Like it doesn't belong to you. You're borrowing it from these platforms that made it possible for you to be seen on these platforms. You need their email, you need their phone number, you need a way to be able to reach them if those platforms go down. And so there's lots of different resources, like even creating. So like this, if people were really interested and you're like, hey, I know that this was a long podcast with Warren, but what I did was I went ahead and I did captain's notes or captain's log. That could be a campaign for you. The captain's log is a downloadable that you can essentially Spark Notes, where it's like, what are the things that I took away from Warren that you can immediately implement in your business to get a measurable result? That's not free. That's not hosted on a website. That they have to download. That's the captain's log that they download. So that's how you can start getting their emails, so that you own their first party data so that you can remarket to them later on like Google or wherever they're at. And so it's just really important that you start owning the attention of your community so that, if you have something important you want to say or a live event that you're speaking at, or you want to start driving people's attention places, you can actually do it instead of posting it on your Instagram and it only being seen by 3% of your audience. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, good news is I did that exact thing. That's why I created my business Instagram account, The Captain's Lifestyle. So good. That makes me happy. But I don't want to go down a deep rabbit hole on this because we still got to get through the rest of the 6 C's. So, but that was good. I think a lot of people will relate to that, because I think entrepreneurs, like they have their own personal Instagram page and then they start posting stuff about their business and nobody gives a shit.
Yeah.
So like you have to create a whole nother Instagram page that's solely focused on your business.
Yeah. I mean, you really want people, like you want to separate Because when people follow, you have to think about it. So like when people followed you initially, say like back in your like hardcore thirst trap days or whatever, and you were just like discovering this, like you were high on maybe like the vanity metrics, and we all like when we were young, we were doing it. We're like we really liked that kind of attention. I mean, that's why we did what we did.
Dopamine hit.
Yeah, the dopamine hit. But then it gets to a certain point where you're just like, oh, I'm more than this. Like I want to be more than this, but your audience they didn't click subscribe. Well, they didn't click subscribe to that version of your, like, they're not clicking subscribe to the new version of your life, right? Mm-hmm. So you need to get them to opt in on your next, like the next version, and the next version, like maybe it's not on your initial Instagram account. Like if you're wanting to do a 180 where you're like, hey guys, like I understand you don't want me to talk and you just want me to take my clothes off, but I have something to say. I've actually like done some deep work, and I actually have these methodologies that allow people, transformation beyond their wildest dreams. Some of the people will be like, oh, I don't want that. I didn't subscribe to that. Yeah. So creating that separate attention graph where people are like, you know what? I've been following you throughout the years. I've seen how you're starting to use your voice, and I actually want to be a part of that new journey for you. And so creating that separate attention graph where you can essentially respect their attention by them opting into something like that. Mm-hmm. Like they have to choose this new version of you, right? And so you just, shoving down, it's almost like evangelizing. It'd be like me really trying to convince you to love the octopus and being like, no, you don't understand how cool they are. Like, and me like posting about octopuses on my Facebook timeline every single day. I'm not trying to evangelize people to love the octopus. They can find it wherever they want to. And so it's like, understanding that you're doing that same thing. Your thing might not be as weird as the octopus or whatever, but it really is like that lifestyle. So, but let's get back to the C's. Yes. Just like I'm gonna kind of like blow through them really quickly. So the second one is core values. These are really important because this is
everything.
It's everything. So if you look at the comments, I don't know if you've seen like comments on OctoNation, we get hundreds of comments like below our videos. They're all positive. They're all people that are curious. They want to learn. They really appreciate the time and attention that we take to the posts. They compliment us. They're really nice people, right? But I manifested that as a direct result of my content strategy, where I take the time to notice people. I comment beneath their posts. And I don't just say thanks or cool or what emojis. I like actually respond to them, or I give them an additional fact, or if somebody doesn't understand something, I take the time to really explain it in a way that I'm just like, okay, if I was trying to explain this to like a 5-year-old, how would I do it so I can empower them to go tell everybody that they know, right? And so you really want to build that value set and like into your community, so that when you're putting that out in the world, you're getting the right people back to you, right? And the core values are in every single aspect of your business. Whoever you collaborate with, you have to make sure that that they fit within your value set as well, right? So it's just really important because they're going to manifest an audience that's going to come into your group. And if that like virtual party situation doesn't go well, there's going to be a lot of dissonance within your community, and there's going to be a lot of culture fights, right? And we see that all the time in like Joe Rogan's comment section. It's like a dumpster fire all the time, right? Yeah. So it's because it's an unmanned type of situation. Like he doesn't delete anything. So that's core values. Then you get into the actual content, right? And so for me, content is really how are you deserving of people's attention on a daily basis? Like what are you creating that's genuinely worth your followers' attention? This isn't something like, oh, I woke up today and I just feel like saying this. Like that's like, I call that emotional, like that's emotional content, right? Mm-hmm. Or like, I got a download from source today and I'm just really feeling inspired to tell you guys this, right? That is okay for Instagram stories, but for strategic content campaigns, that's not going to deepen the affinity that you have from a sustainable standpoint, because it's emotional. So one day you might not feel like posting or explaining that. Like you have to actually create like interview with an octopus, where it's like I go to various aquariums. We have artist spotlight where I showcase really wow or like awe-inducing art, and I break down the art, how long it took them, kind of a little bit about their history. We have what I call deep dives, where we'll explain like an octopus's tongue, or like how an octopus hunts or whatever, and we'll break it down like everything you needed to know about it. So like there's all these different things that we do that's a part of our content strategy that will like manifest the audience that we want. And it's a resource. It's deeply like people want to share our content all the time because they're like, you got to read this caption.
Yeah.
So that's content. Then you get into collaboration. So collaboration is like who's currently serving your ideal audience that demonstrates your core values and could benefit from maybe a gap that you fill as a result of just like maybe your unique perspective on things. So with the woman that I helped create the group for people who suffer chronic debilitating migraine, a perfect person for her to collaborate with is the Association of Migraine Disorders, right? Perfect person. There's the National Headache Foundation. Perfect person or perfect organization. Yeah. There was Champs. There was the Migraine Diva, who's somebody in her industry. And so she reached out to all these people, and I actually gave her an idea to, because I didn't see any podcasts dealing with migraine. So I had her pitch a podcast idea to the National Headache Foundation, and now she's the podcast host of the Heads Up, which is a podcast for the National Headache Foundation.
Wow.
So you have to be really strategic with, who's currently serving your perfect people, and what value or what content can you create that would potentially be interesting to them, or what opportunities do they have to speak? What opportunities do they have to, can you potentially do to strengthen their connection with their audience through you? So it's like being very value driven, right? So that's collaboration. Then it's connection. So connection is all about your existing community. What campaigns are you intentionally creating to make your community members feel seen, right? So like, with you, it might be like before and after photos, or it might be an incentive that you create around, say you have this really unique gift or like thing that you sent out, like, I don't know, maybe it could be a shirt. It's like the golden shirt, and it's like, whatever. And people get it when they demonstrate like mastery in a given part of like your program or something. And it's like this unique, they're just, all these campaigns are just based around how can you create this connection with your audience so that your existing community sees, hey, there's an opportunity for me to be spotlit by this community in a way that makes me feel good or makes me feel happy about being a part of the community. Yeah. And so like that's connection. So it's just strengthening that connection with your existing. And then you get into conversion. Conversion is all about how do you ethically monetize your communities. And so I am like allergic to people who put like countdown timers on pages. Like if you don't get in now, like, you're like, there's all this marketing that I'm like, if you have a legitimate community who loves you and you're doing all of these things, you do not have to do marketing that's sleazy. You don't have to do overblown testimonials. You don't have to do any of this stuff. You just have to present an opportunity, present that there's an opportunity to work with you, and it'll sell out, right? But yeah, so it's just, so all conversion in is how do you create the sales process or the campaign behind people actually wanting to buy from you? Or if you're an affiliate and you're promoting somebody else's product, how do you promote it in a way that you don't have to sell your soul to do it, or that you're not over delivering for a client? Because I see a lot of, especially fitness influencers, they are sacrificing their whole entire community for a 15% discount to be a brand ambassador for a brand. I'm just like, you are way more than you getting free product at this point. Yeah. So that brand is making a whole lot more money. Like that's kind of where I fight on behalf of the influencer or community leader. Mm-hmm. So that's conversion. And then you get into consistency. So a lot of this, by the time that I kind of get done talking about all the 7 C's, the community leader or the influencer goes, wow, I'm overwhelmed. And so consistency is all about like, how do we create a sustainable, like either content calendar or who do we need to hire that's doing some of like, say like podcast editing or doing thumbnails on YouTube, so that you don't feel stressed out. Like you feel like all of this is manageable. Because if if someone like me is working with you and you go from 0 to like 200,000 followers in a year or 6 months, it just depends on what the niche is.
Overwhelmed.
You can really get overwhelmed because your community starts to want to hear from you daily. They can't get enough of you. And it can be very overwhelming to think that you need to be on all the time, or that you need to be documenting all of a sudden your whole entire life now. And I've gone through that experience with a lot of different people who like now, like they have this massive community and their community has expectations. And if they don't show up, they're DMing them and being like, why haven't you posted today? And so it can get overwhelming very quickly if there's not a system put in place beforehand to manage that type of fanatical community. Because once you start plugging all of these things in and it all starts happening, you're like, it's happening. Like, oh, like Warren was right. Like this is all going down. People want more stuff. You can get overwhelmed and shut down and just completely do away with your community, like delete your account. Like you're just like, I don't want to do any of this. I'd rather go get a corporate job.
Yeah.
And I've had some people, and I think in the beginning where it was just like, I didn't do a good enough job of setting them up for the expectation of what a fanatical community does or is. And they just immediately got overwhelmed and shut down. Because it kind of is intrusive. I mean, you hear the stories of, their community showing up at their house. Yep. It's like, you can't do things like just show up in a restaurant and post that you're at a restaurant until after you've left the restaurant now. It's like, there's certain things where it's just like, no, you don't have the same life that you did before. Yeah. So, making sure that they're aware of all those things before they start popping off.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of outsourcing. Man, I want to dive into every single one of those. So it sounds like we might have to have a part 2. But yeah, Warren, I want to be respectful of your time. So real quick, tell people more about where they can, again, find more about OctoNation, and is the Community Leaders Association, can people go check that out, or is that still?
Yeah, they can go check it out. If you go to communityleadersassociation.com and kind of look around, like you could even join if you wanted to, but we haven't done a push for it at all. Mm-hmm. We're working with our beta group right now, and I think we're gonna launch it like this next month. And so we're just testing out. It's just a different model. So like testing out, redoing those 7 C's of building a fanatical community, but for the Community Leaders Association, and understanding the psychology behind these community leaders. Cause I'm super intentional when I get involved with anything new, that I really understand like the inner workings behind, like, what are they thinking about? And what I've seen now with like true community leaders on Facebook that have Facebook communities of like 2 million or 3 million people, they view monetizing their communities as exploiting their members. And so being very compassionate towards them and really explaining things in such a way that they understand that they're actually providing them an opportunity for, value, that, you have to explain things in a certain way. So I'm being very like careful of like how we develop things, which is why we've kind of are slowly rolling it out. But yeah, so that's Community Leaders Association. With OctoNation, just go to OctoNation anywhere. I mean, you can type it into Google. Our blog managers just started pumping out tons of content on our blog with our writers. And so I love watching our blog grow. So if you're curious about that, you can go there. But yeah, I'm around. All you have to do is search.
Perfect. Like I said in the intro, guys, better than Warren Buffett, because I'm not sure Warren Buffett cares about the ocean or octopuses or even knows about the 7 C's. So yeah, Warren, thank you so much for coming on. I think we will have to schedule a whole nother podcast episode diving into the 7 C's, because that's amazing. Yeah. So yeah, thank you again for coming on, and don't forget, live the Captain's lifestyle. Peace.